Run like Kipchoge. Today we're going to share 5 things that Eliud Kipchoge does that you can apply to your training to make you a better runner today.
Okay, so Dave, you won't believe this, but I was digging around the internet and I found data from Kipchoge from 2017 that goes into detail into his training. If you want to see the links to the data that we'll be discussing, the links are in the description below.
So tell me, what have we found?
Okay, so we'll start with the main thing that we go on about here at Coach Perry, is easy runs easy.
One of those things that I suppose I think about world record paces and what Kipchoge is capable of. I can't imagine him running easy if I think of what my easy running is.
But you need to remember that for you, running at 4 minutes per K, for example, which he does on most of his easy days, it's not the same as him running 4 minutes a K. You are probably racing at 4 minutes a K, but he runs his marathon at 2:54 per kilometer.
Fair enough, I suppose. I mean, if you think about one of his easy runs, for example, is he does a 10K run in 40 minutes.
No, exactly.
For me to think of a 40-minute 10K is ludicrous. That not even a race will I be able to manage that at the moment. Exactly. So for him to be doing that as an easy run, I suppose just trying to get your head around that is quite a thing.
So what we've got to do is, instead of looking at the absolute paces, let's look at it as a relative pace to his marathon pace. As we said, he's got the world record. It's 2:01:09, which is a very ridiculous time. So if you compare his easy run pace as a relative percentage to his marathon pace, you realize that he's actually running quite slowly. So as we said, his range is somewhere from 3:30 a K, so as slow as 4:24 a kilometer for him. I say slow, but for him. And that is about 20% to 50% slower than his marathon pace. Now, that means nothing to you as it is, but to compare it to something real that you can understand is if you take a 3-hour marathon runner, okay? So for a 3-hour marathon runner, that's running at 4 minutes and 17 seconds per kilometer. That's the same as someone at that pace running his easy runs at 5:09 to 6:25 a kilometer.
That makes so much more sense. I suppose if you think about it, that relative intensity, a little bit more comprehensible for me to get my head around.
And if you even move it further, for a 4-hour marathon runner, that's the same as running 6:49 to 8:30 a kilometer. That's the same relative pace as what Kipchoge is doing his easy runs. So even though for us those seem like superhuman paces, he's actually running very, very easy for himself.
So you say relative to him, that's really slow, really easy, but how much of that is he actually doing? You know what I mean? So we often talk about the large volumes of easy runs that we should be doing. Is he doing that much easy running?
If we look at on a daily basis, in distance, he runs maybe 16 kilometers to 21 kilometers in the morning. And because he's a pro and he has more time to run, and this is what he does for a living, he runs twice a day. We don't advocate running twice a day for the amateur, but for a pro trying to break world records, this is what they do. In the afternoon, he might run 8 to 12 kilometers. In terms of time, this is not really about the distances. In terms of time, that is an hour to an hour and 20 minutes in the morning and about 30 to 50 minutes in the afternoon. So those times are still in the normal range that we would prescribe to people to run.
So that overall volume, sort of, again, if we use that word relative, it still is quite comparable to what your average 4-hour or 5-hour marathoner might be doing.
At least for the morning runs.
Yeah. Again, I'm just trying to get my head around the fact that he's running an hour and 20 minutes and he's doing a 21K run. I just can't get my head around that.
It is quite impressive, and that's what makes them superhuman and why we aspire to be like them, of course.
No, 100%. So I completely get that.
We need to now talk about what is the importance of this to amateur runners. And the important takeaway here is that you need to run your easy runs easy. And easy is relative. It's different for you, it's different for me, it's different for Kipchoge. But for your ability, run your easy runs easy.
To just add to that is the fact that we're really talking about an athlete who's the world record holder. I mean, he's the tip of the spear, is still running easy runs. So he's not any different to what we're telling amateur runners to do, in the sense that he is running easy and he's doing a lot of his training easy. He's not because he's a world record holder that he's doing all his training runs superhuman fast. So I suppose that is a big thing. And you touched on it briefly. This is what they do for a living. Exactly. So where we have full-time jobs, we've got other commitments in the day, he finishes a run, probably has a good meal afterwards, and then chances are he sleeps for the rest of the day. Indeed. Or takes naps throughout the day, so that recovery does help a lot.
No, it does. So he runs a lot, but he does rest a lot. He sleeps for an hour a day.
Wow.
So he takes an hour nap every
I
day.
wish I could have an hour nap
No, of course.
every day.
And he has access to massage and that sort of thing, things that you maybe don't have access to on a daily basis. So, yeah.
Talk me through, I've had a brief look, some of the intensity. So I know that's another point that we don't always advocate only doing easy runs. There's a need for doing intensity work. And for a man of Kipchoge's caliber, I'm going to assume there's a fair amount of intensity built into his training. How much speed work is he doing? What kind of speed work is he doing? And again, how's that volume compared to what I should be doing if I was training for a marathon?
Okay, we can now move to his track sessions. So he's got a very, very structured training program. He does track sessions on a Tuesday and a fartlek on the road on Fridays. Okay, so for the track, it's structured training, and they do intervals that range from short intervals, so 200 meters and 400 meter intervals, all the way up to about 1,200 meters. And he does high volume. In terms of the number of repetitions he does, he'll do a session like 14 times 800 meters. Now, it sounds crazy, but again, you got to remember that he is essentially superhuman. So he's doing these 800 meter intervals in about 2 minutes and 10 seconds, which again sounds fast, but if you work the pace back, that's around his 10 kilometer pace. So those sessions serve as almost like speed work for marathon training. It's making marathon pace feel easier. We know we always say that you run at your race pace, and you sometimes have to run a little bit faster than race pace to make the turnover feel easier and to add some economy and efficiency into your running, and that's what he does on the track.
So he's not running max effort though. So if you say to the average runner, we're doing a speed session today, they think they're doing 200s or 400s and they need to be killing themselves in every training session. You're telling me he doesn't actually run max effort?
So he'll do a 400 meter interval in 62 seconds, which is fast for us, but for him that's 5k pace. And if he's doing longer intervals, about 1200 meter intervals, he'd do those at about 2:45 a k, which if you think about his marathon world record, that's about half marathon pace. So he's working at very, very specific paces that are relative and important to his target event. He's training to run the best marathon he can, so his track sessions are there to build speed for the marathon.
So if he was training for a 5k, he'd probably be running faster and shorter type of intervals. It's going to be race specific, event specific okay. So that makes a lot more sense. And just, you talk about a high volume though in terms of the number of repetitions. I understand that he has the conditioning for it though. He's, again, we use that phrase superhuman, but with that high volume, let's go back to what we mentioned in the easy run part in terms of the distribution throughout the week. How you said he's doing 2 type of higher intensity sessions in the week, but how much of that does that make up? So is he running sort of 30-40% of his training as high intensity?
So there's now the next point that's very, very important. We often talk about the 80-20 principle, that you need to do the bulk of your running at an easy pace and some of your running is high intensity. So for his Tuesday session, for example, he runs between 10 to 15 kilometers in total with the repetitions he does on the track. And for his Saturday session, the fartlek session he does on the road, they'll do an hour fartlek mixed up with hard running and rest periods. So something like 2 minutes hard, 1 minute off. If you look at how much time he spends running fast in both those 2 sessions, it's about 10Ks to 15Ks in each session. It's about 20 to 30 kilometers in total for the whole week. And if you add up his total volume, he runs between 175 kilometers and 190 kilometers in this specific phase of training where he's training for the marathon. In his base training, he might run a little bit more. And if you do the relative percentage, he's only doing about 10 to 15% of his running at high intensity. So the track work and the fartlek work in total only makes up 10 to 15% of his total volume in a training week.
I absolutely love hearing that, because I mean that again is the tip of the spear from an individual elite level athlete that's running such a small amount. So 10 to 15% of their week's volume is high intensity in that particular block, where you often hear from the amateurs that are saying, well, I need to be running all my runs faster to achieve that. And this really just drives home the point that if the elite athletes, I suppose, are doing that small amount, again, it's relative because he's doing a lot in comparison to what I would do. But if we talk that relative percentage, that's still, I mean, 15% is not a lot at all.
And the thing is, he can actually get away with it. If you think about his conditioning, he's been a pro athlete for 20 years. He won his first title in 2003, and he's just won the Olympic Games in 2021, sorry. So he can actually get away with doing higher volume of high intensity training, but he doesn't. He still sticks to the same principles that we encourage our athletes to do. Yeah. Keeping your high intensity training to be less than 20% of your total volume.
Yeah, that's incredible, and I really love hearing data like that. That's a really cool stat. A key thing here to really point out as well is, you mentioned his conditioning. He's been doing this for years. He is strong enough and well enough conditioned to be running multiple sessions in a day. And that's not something we necessarily advocate unless it's completely necessary. And even if, it's still not something you should be doing every day. Where he can get away with it, he's sleeping, he's conditioned, he's in a position where he can still get away with that. But again, it's the overall volume that's, I suppose, is still quite relative.
I mean, for this level, you do need to run a lot more than we do. But yeah, it's controlled, it's proportional, and it's very well structured.
He's strength training. Tell me, does he do strength?
Well, what do you think, Dave?
Well, I'm going to say yes, and I'm really hoping so.
So you're right there. So he does strength training twice a week on his schedule. It's on a Wednesday and a Friday, and they do an hour of strength on a Wednesday and an hour of strength on a Friday, and it's focusing on the same things that we focus on, the prime moving muscles, core, glutes, hamstrings. They don't use a lot of weight training, and it focuses a little bit on mobility and that sort of thing.
So it's more strength to complement the running that is key. So again, not necessarily having to throw massive weights around in the gym. So that's a good thing as well. I'm really glad to hear that the pro athletes, we advocate strength training so much. So the fact that the pro athletes are doing the same thing, it's not us just thumb-sucking ideas and telling people to do things that the pros are at least doing the strength training, and I'm assuming consistently. It's one of those things. And I think the big thing with strength training as well is there will come different phases in the training plan where strength becomes a little bit more important. You might do more training, more strength sessions in a week, where you might do a little bit less when you're more in that competition block or you are training right towards an event. So I suppose the weight of strength training importance does vary throughout the season.
No, it does. I mean, he probably does a lot more strength training in the start. We don't have a full picture of his training from the start of a training cycle to the end. This is just a specific part of his training, but we know from interviews and conversations that he does strength training right from when he comes out of his rest period. So after a race, he'll rest for a month, and he starts off doing strength training immediately. So he's on it from the start. It's a very critical and important part of his training. It's not something he's doing just as an add-on here and there. It's part of his training, like his running, like his resting, and his recovery and his nutrition. All of this stuff makes up his entire program, and it's all a holistic, complete training plan for him. So one thing you'll notice about Kipchoge's training when you look at the data is he's incredibly consistent. And I mean consistency in sessions and consistency throughout the week.
I can imagine, and I mean, you're never going to get to where he is without that sort of consistency. And we talk about that consistency, like you say, throughout the week, but I'm assuming he's very rarely missing sessions. He's getting all the sessions in, and in terms of trying to stay as healthy, putting all the puzzle pieces together, he's putting weeks on top of weeks.
So this is the key thing about his training, is when you look at the weeks stacked on each other, you realize that the Tuesday session, his Thursday long run, and his Saturday session are consistently week in, week out. He's doing them. He's doing his morning runs, his 60 to 80 minute runs, and the second runs aren't fixed, but he does them. But every day, for him, every day, he's out there training and getting all the bits in. And he's been doing this for a long time. This man has very little in terms of injuries to report in his career.
So I think that's probably a big thing, is the fact that he's been doing all the right things most of the time, and he's been doing it for so long that consistency really has gotten him to the point of where he is today.
And that's what we want you to take away from this part of the analysis on Kipchoge's training, is that consistency really is one of the pillars of training. It's not enough to just do a couple of sessions here, take a week off and do a little bit of hard training, peaking for your race. You've got to be out there week in, week out, training cycle to training cycle, year to year. And the more training you build upon stack, will help you to become a better runner in the long term.
Yeah, and I suppose, look, life's always going to get in the way. So something will come up, and for most of us, again, who aren't professional athletes, there'll be meetings at work, we might get sick here and there, so that's normal, but it's really trying to do as much of the right things as often as you possibly can. So making sure that that's what we're referring to when we're talking consistency. It's doing a lot of the right things most of the time. Professional athletes really are a good example to aspire to. However, there are 9 things that you should not be doing that pro athletes do, and those are in this video.